you have tried to change before. Maybe it was exercise. Maybe it was eating better. Maybe it was finally building that morning routine everyone seems to have but you. And here is what probably happened. You started strong. You felt it, that surge of energy, that feeling of this time it's real. You made the plan. You told yourself things would be different. Then somewhere around day 4, maybe day 10 if you were lucky, the whole thing quietly fell apart. And you sat with the same familiar feeling you always sit with after. The feeling that something is wrong with you, that you are not disciplined enough, not motivated enough, not the kind of person who actually changes. Here is what I need to tell you right now, in the next 30 seconds, before we go any further. That feeling is a lie, not a gentle misunderstanding, not a slight distortion, a lie built into the very approach to change that almost every system, every book, every motivational speech has been selling you for decades. Because the problem is not you. The problem is that you have been following faulty instructions. And in this video, I am going to show you exactly what those faulty instructions are, why they have been sabotaging you, and what the science actually says about how human beings form habits and change their behavior. Stay with me, because what you are about to learn is going to feel completely backwards, and that is exactly why it works. Let me say something you probably believe right now, or have believed at some point. You believe that if you just had more willpower, more motivation, you would finally follow through. That the people who have the habits you want must be stronger than you, more disciplined, more committed. You have probably tried to manufacture more motivation through sheer force of will. You have set big goals, made big promises to yourself, downloaded the apps, maybe paid for the gym membership. And you have probably watched all of that collapse again. Here is the contrarian truth that changes everything. Willpower is not a character trait. Motivation is not the engine. They are the most unreliable variables in the entire equation of behavior change. Research in behavior science shows that motivation fluctuates, not occasionally, but constantly, day to day, hour to hour, minute to minute. Designing your habits around motivation is like building your house on sand and then being shocked every time the foundation cracks. The approach almost everyone uses to build habits is fundamentally broken. It mistakes the symptom, lack of motivation, for the cause. B.J. Fogg, a behavior scientist at Stanford, who has personally coached over 40,000 people through habit change, discovered something that upends the entire conversation. The real reason habits fail has almost nothing to do with who you are, and almost everything to do with how they were designed. His framework, the result of over 2 decades of research, reveals 3 specific elements that drive every human behavior, and shows that when any one of them is misaligned, the behavior collapses. No matter how motivated you are, no matter how much you want it. Here is what we are going to cover today. First, the actual mechanics of how behavior works, why you do what you do and don't do what you wish you would. This is the foundation everything else is built on. Second, the motivation trap. Why every system that starts with motivation is almost guaranteed to fail, and what to do instead. Third, the ability dial, the most powerful and most ignored variable in all of habit formation. This is where the real leverage is. Fourth, the anchor system, how to embed new habits into your life so seamlessly that you barely have to think about them. And fifth, the celebration mechanism, the counterintuitive neuroscience of how positive emotion literally wires new behavior into your brain faster than any other tool available to you. By the end of this video, you are not going to have a new motivational speech to give yourself in the mirror. You are going to have a completely different model of how change actually works, and a specific, science-backed method for making it happen. Let's start at the foundation. Every behavior you have ever performed, every habit you love, every habit you hate, every behavior you have tried and failed to build, came from the same 3 variables. Not 2, not 10, 3. A behavior scientist named B.J. Fogg spent 10 years looking for the key that unlocks all human behavior. and in 2007, he found it. He calls it the Fogg Behavior Model, and once you understand it, you will never think about your habits the same way again. Here is the equation. Behavior happens when motivation, ability, and a prompt all come together at the same moment in time. All three, simultaneously. Miss any one of them, and the behavior does not happen. Let me make this concrete. In 2010, Fogg was at the gym. He was on the elliptical machine, headphones in. His phone buzzed. It was a text from the Red Cross asking him to donate to victims of the earthquake in Haiti. He donated. Right there, mid-workout, in 30 seconds. Why? Motivation, he wanted to help. Ability, replying to a text was easy. Prompt, the text message arrived at that exact moment. Now imagine the same situation, but the Red Cross had mailed him a letter instead. He would have thrown it away without reading it. Same motivation, same ability, no prompt, no behavior. Or imagine the text arrived, but asked him to call a number and read a credit card number aloud. His wallet was in his car. Ability collapses. Even with high motivation and a great prompt, the behavior doesn't happen. This is not a minor insight. This is a complete reframe of how change works. Most people, when a habit fails, go immediately to one conclusion. I didn't want it badly enough. They diagnose a motivation problem, but the behavior equation tells us that motivation is just one of three variables, and statistically, it is rarely the variable that is broken. Think about a habit you have been trying to build, something you genuinely want to do. You want to exercise, you want to meditate, you want to write more. The motivation is probably there. So why isn't the behavior happening? Because either the ability is too low, or the prompt is missing or unreliable. Fogg calls this the troubleshooting order, and it is almost exactly the reverse of what most people do. When a behavior is not happening, most people start with motivation. They try to want it more. They watch more inspiring videos. They recommit. They make stricter promises to themselves. But the correct troubleshooting order is this. Start with the prompt. Is there something reliably reminding you to do the behavior? If not, that is your problem. Fix the prompt first. If the prompt is there and the behavior still is not happening, then look at ability. Is the behavior too hard to do, too time-consuming, too mentally demanding? Fix the ability next. Only after ruling out prompt and ability problems should you turn to motivation. This one distinction, this reversal of the troubleshooting order, is going to save you years of frustrated effort. You are not the problem. You never were. Your design is. Behaviors are like bicycles. The core mechanisms are the same, whether you are talking about a habit you love or a habit you hate. Wheels, brakes, pedals. If the bike is not moving, you do not blame the rider's character. You check the tires, the chain, the brakes. You fix the design. Think about Katie. Katie was a high-performing executive, managed dozens of people and a $10 million budget. By every conventional measure, she was extraordinarily disciplined. And yet every single morning, she told herself she was going to work out at 4:30 a.m. And every single morning she picked up her phone instead. One notification led to a video, which led to a feed, which led to another video, and suddenly it was 5:30 and the workout was gone. She blamed herself. She told herself that her discipline must have run out, that she had used it all up on work and had nothing left for herself. But here is what the behavior model actually shows. Her scrolling habit had enormous ability. Phone already in hand is her alarm, content designed by the most sophisticated attention engineers in history, and a perfect prompt, firing at the exact moment she was most vulnerable. Her exercise habit had no reliable prompt and was buried beneath a behavior with maximum ability and irresistible cues. This was not a character flaw, it was a design flaw. When she finally changed the design, moved her phone to the kitchen, and bought an old-fashioned alarm clock, the scrolling behavior died. Not because her motivation increased, because the ability collapsed and the prompt disappeared. The behavior equation at work. Now, here is where it gets interesting. Because once you know that all behavior is driven by map, The next logical question is, which variable gives you the most leverage? And the answer to that question is one of the most liberating things you will hear today. Before I get to that, I need to show you something about motivation first. Because most people walk away from a video like this and immediately go back to trying to fix their motivation. It is the most seductive path, and it is the one that will undo everything. There is a specific trap built into the way motivation works, and if you do not understand it, it will swallow you. Again, you have been here before. It is the beginning of the year, or the beginning of the month, or the day after something scared you, a doctor's visit, a number on the scale, a moment in the mirror. And your motivation is high. You feel it, real this time. You make plans, you buy things, you sign up, you tell people. And for a while, sometimes days, sometimes weeks, it works. You are doing the thing. You are the person you always wanted to be. Then the wave crashes. Fogg calls this the motivation wave. And it is not a personal failing. It is the predictable behavior of motivation as a variable. Motivation is not a stable force. It is a fluctuating one. High levels of motivation are both scattershot and unsustainable. They help us do hard things once. They can move mountains in a surge. But they cannot maintain daily repetition over months and years. That is simply not what they were designed to do. Consider Junie, a morning radio show host in Chicago. High energy, extraordinarily driven, the kind of person who made it to a major market radio show through sheer willpower alone. And she could not stop eating sugar. Not for lack of trying. Her mother had died from diabetes, then her grandmother, then her sisters received diagnoses. She had every reason in the world, every motivating force imaginable to change this habit. And when her grief spiked, her motivation spiked. She went cold turkey, lasted a day, maybe two. Then the sugar came back, and the self-blame came with it. What Junie did not understand, what almost no one tells you, is that her motivation was already at its ceiling. There was nowhere higher to push it. But motivation alone could not change the behavior, because the behavior was a design problem, not a motivation problem. Once she understood this, once she stopped trying to want it more and started redesigning the environment, she made changes that actually held. She swapped her accessible sugar for snacks she liked, but that had less sugar. She designed habits that crowded out the behavior. She treated each stumble not as a moral failure, but as a design insight. The trap is this. We believe that if we could just sustain our motivation, if we could bottle the feeling we have on day one, everything would work. So every time the feeling fades, we try to manufacture more of it. But motivation is like a party animal friend. Incredible for a night, unreliable for a flight home. You cannot build a life on motivation. You build it on design. Here is the deeper problem. People do not just chase motivation, they chase the abstraction. They want to eat healthy. They want to be more productive. They want to get in shape. These are wonderful aspirations, but an aspiration is not a behavior. You cannot do an aspiration. You cannot do get in shape at 3 p.m. on a Tuesday. Fogg ran into this constantly when coaching companies. A major bank wanted customers to save $500 for emergencies. They built entire websites explaining why saving mattered, and almost nothing changed. Because information does not reliably change behavior. Fogg calls this the information action fallacy, the idea that if people just understood the importance of something, they would do it. Billions of dollars have been wasted on this mistake. What changes behavior is not understanding. It is a specific, concrete, easy-to-do action with a clear prompt. The shift is this. Stop asking, how do I get more motivated? Start asking, what is the exact specific behavior I want to do? And what is making it hard? That second question leads somewhere real, which brings us to the variable that actually changes everything. Because here is what nobody tells you about habit formation. The most powerful dial you have, the one with the most leverage, the most reliability, the most research behind it, is not motivation. It is not willpower. It is not mindset. It is something you have complete control over, starting right now. And using it correctly means you can build a habit on a day when you have almost no motivation at all. Floss one tooth. That is where this starts. B.J. Fogg, the Stanford behavior scientist, the person who has spent decades studying what makes habits stick, decided to floss one tooth. Not all of them. One. This is not a metaphor. He literally sat in a dentist's chair, being told again that he was not flossing. And he went home and committed to flossing exactly one tooth. Every day. That was the entire habit. Within 2 weeks, he was flossing all his teeth twice a day. He has done so ever since. This is the ability dial. And it is the single most important concept in this entire video. Here is what the Fogg Behavior Model tells us. Motivation and ability have a compensatory relationship. When ability is high, when a behavior is easy to do, the amount of motivation required drops significantly. When ability is low, when a behavior is hard, you need enormous motivation to get above the action line. And here is the crucial insight. The only consistent, sustainable way to make a habit stick is to make it easy enough that it will happen even on days when your motivation is low. Because those days will come. They always do. Most people approach habit formation the opposite way. They design for their best days. They make big commitments when the motivation wave is high. They imagine the version of themselves who is disciplined and energized and well-rested. But habits are not built on your best days. They are built by showing up on your worst ones. A tiny habit that survives a Wednesday when you are sick, stressed, and exhausted is worth 100 ambitious plans that collapse by day 3. Fogg has a framework for diagnosing exactly why a habit is hard to do. He calls them the ability factors. There are 5. Time, money, physical effort, mental effort, and routine fit. How well the behavior slots into your existing life. He calls this the ability chain. And your chain is only as strong as its weakest link. Here is the deceptively powerful question. What is making this behavior hard to do? He calls it the discovery question. And it forces you to stop blaming yourself and start diagnosing the actual design problem. Think about Sarika, a project manager in Bangalore, living with bipolar disorder, trying to build a daily routine, something her doctors told her was essential for managing her symptoms. For years, she failed. Not because she lacked motivation. She desperately wanted this routine. She failed because every habit she tried was sized for her best days. When she discovered the tiny habits approach, she stopped trying to meditate for 20 minutes. She started with 3 breaths on a pillow. She stopped trying to cook herself breakfast every morning. She started by turning on the stovetop burner. She stopped trying to do 30 minutes of physical therapy. She started with 30 seconds of stretching on her yoga mat. These tiny starter steps, she calls them, were not the destination. They were the first action in the direction of the destination. And that distinction matters enormously. Because a starter step does something brilliant, it changes your perception of the behavior. Once Sarika had her hand on the burner knob, cooking breakfast no longer felt impossible. She had already started. Momentum is neurologically real. Completing a step, however small, creates a signal in your brain that this behavior is being executed. And most of the time, momentum carries you forward. Most days she ended up cooking the full breakfast. On her harder days, she turned the burner on and off, and that was enough to keep the habit alive. This is the concept Fogg calls scaling back, taking the behavior you want and shrinking it to its minimum viable version. If you want to read every day, your tiny habit is to open the book. Not read a chapter, open it. The recipe is open the book. Sometimes you close it after 1 sentence. Sometimes you read for an hour. But the habit, the neural pathway, is being built every time you open it. If you want to meditate for 10 minutes, your tiny habit is to take your meditation cushion out of the closet. That is the behavior, not the meditation, the retrieval of the cushion. These feel ridiculous. They feel too small. They feel like they cannot possibly matter. That feeling is precisely what you are designed to feel after years of being told that effort and intensity are what creates results. Here is what the data actually shows. Instagram was built on this principle. When Kevin Krieger and Mike Systrom analyzed the failure of their previous app, they found one golden behavior inside the wreckage: photo sharing. People loved it. So they stripped everything else away and made photo sharing take exactly 3 clicks. 3. While competitors had features people wanted, Instagram had simplicity people could not resist. Within 18 months, Facebook bought them for $1 billion. Everything big started small. Google started as one search box. Amazon started as an online bookstore. Slack started as a gaming company's internal messaging tool. These companies did not launch with everything. They launched with one tiny, ridiculously easy behavior that could survive contact with the real world. Your habits work the same way. There is a second answer to the discovery question, one beyond just making behaviors tiny. And it is about finding the right tool or resource to remove a specific weak link. Think about Molly, a busy professional who wanted to meal prep every Sunday. She and her husband would plan to cook for 5 hours. She kept finding reasons to leave the kitchen. She was not unmotivated. She knew how much better she felt when she ate well. But 5 hours was the weakest link in her ability chain. The solution was not more motivation. It was a mandolin slicer, a kitchen tool that cut her prep time in half. By solving the actual bottleneck, the weak link in the ability chain, the behavior became doable on her real Sunday, not her fantasy Sunday. Ask yourself right now, what is the habit you keep failing to build? And if you strip away the self-blame for a moment and just look at it as a design problem, what is the weakest link? What is the thing that is making it hard to do? Is it time? Then make the behavior take less time. Is it physical effort? Then reduce the physical demand. Is it mental energy? Then eliminate decisions from the process. Is it routine fit? Then find a better anchor point in your day. We will talk about anchor points in the next section. But first, let me give you the master key. The winning pattern. Simplicity changes behavior. This is not a guess. This is one of the most replicated findings in behavior science. When you design a behavior to be as easy as possible, you stack the deck so heavily in your favor that even low motivation, even average motivation, gets you above the action line. And what happens when you keep showing up? Ability increases. The more you do a behavior, the easier it becomes. Your skill grows. Your confidence grows. The behavior naturally scales up. This is not the advice anyone wants to hear. We want the bold move, the dramatic transformation, the before and after. But the before and after stories that actually last, the ones you never see because they are not dramatic enough to make headlines, start with something absurdly small. Something so small, you almost feel embarrassed to call it a habit. Fogg has a name for this design principle, a metaphor. Think of a tiny habit as a seed. A small seed planted in the right spot grows without coaxing. A large plant with shallow roots topples in the first storm. But a tiny habit with deep, consistent roots that grows and grows and grows, and nothing can knock it over. Start smaller than you think you should. That is not defeatism. That is the science. So now you know how to size a habit correctly. Small. Absurdly small. Small enough to do on your worst day. But there is a second failure point that even well-designed tiny habits hit. And it is so obvious that most people never even think to address it. You have probably had this experience. You genuinely wanted to do something. The behavior was easy. And you just forgot. That is not a motivation problem. That is a prompt problem. And the solution is one of the most elegant design hacks in all of behavior science. No behavior happens without a prompt. Not one. Ever. Even the behaviors that feel automatic, brushing your teeth, making coffee, checking your phone, all of them have a prompt. You just stopped noticing them years ago. This is the most overlooked piece of habit design. Most people assume that if they want a behavior badly enough, they will remember to do it. They rely on themselves. And memory fails. Reliably. Fogg calls this a person prompt, relying on your own internal reminder. And his verdict on it is clear. It is the least effective of all prompt types. We forget because we are human. Memory is not reliable when behavior is not at stake. The classic alternative is a context prompt, a calendar notification, a sticky note, a phone alarm. These work, but only temporarily, and they multiply into noise. If you have ever had so many sticky notes on your mirror that you stop seeing any of them, you know exactly what this means. Fogg's research led him to something better, something elegant, something that most habit books never discuss in this depth. He calls it an anchor, and he had the insight for it while standing in his bedroom, opening his underwear drawer after a shower. He noticed something. After the shower, he always dried off. After drying off, he always walked to the bedroom. After walking to the bedroom, he always opened the drawer. The sequence was automatic, invisible, hardwired. And the insight was this: to create a new habit, all you need to do is find an existing behavior and put your new habit right after it. The recipe is simple. After I anchor, I will NEW tiny behavior, not I will exercise every morning. That is an aspiration. After I put on my shoes in the morning, I will walk to the end of the street. After I flush the toilet, I will do 2 push-ups. After I start the coffee maker, I will open my gratitude journal. These are habits. These are specific. These have a natural, reliable prompt built in. And because the anchor is already wired into your life, you do not need willpower or memory to remember your new habit. Your existing routine does it for you. Fogg calls this the power of after. It is not magic. It is closer to chemistry. Combine the right behaviors in the right sequence, and the new habit fuses to the existing one. Consider Amy. Amy was a freelance writer going through a divorce, raising 3 kids, and trying to build her business against serious financial pressure. She needed to work, but anxiety made focus nearly impossible. She would sit down at her desk and end up reorganizing her to-do list for 2 hours. Her new tiny habit was to write down one task, just one, the most important thing, on a post-it note. That was it, not to do the task, just to identify it and write it down. And her anchor was the moment her daughter shut the car door after the kindergarten drop-off. That sound, the car door clicking closed, was her prompt. Every single morning, reliable as breathing. Within a week, the habit felt automatic. The car door clicked, her mind shifted into work mode. The post-it went on the dashboard. Most days, that one task led to 3 tasks, which led to a full productive day. The habit had found its roots. 6 months later, Amy had quadrupled her income and won custody of her children. One post-it, one door click. Here is what makes an anchor effective. 3 things. First, location. Your anchor and your new habit should happen in the same physical space. If your new habit is wiping down the kitchen counter, your anchor should be something that happens in the kitchen. Do not anchor a kitchen habit to something that happens in the bedroom. Physical proximity is the most important factor in pairing behaviors. Second, frequency. Your anchor should happen as often as you want to do your new habit. If you want a daily habit, anchor it to something you do every day. If you want a weekly habit, anchor it to a weekly routine. Third, theme. The best anchors share a purpose or feeling with the new habit. Sarika found that watering her jade plant and then drinking water felt thematically connected. Both were acts of nourishment. This coherence made the sequence easier to remember and more satisfying to complete. Fogg adds one more tool for refining anchors that is worth naming: the trailing edge. If your anchor is fuzzy, after I eat breakfast or after I get home from work, it will not work as reliably as a precise moment. The trailing edge is the last specific action at the end of your anchor. After I eat breakfast is fuzzy. After I put my breakfast dish in the dishwasher and hear the door click shut, that is a trailing edge. Precise. Sensory. Unmistakable. Elena, one of Fogg's students, could not get her habit of wiping the kitchen counter to stick. Her anchor was after I rinse my cereal bowl. It seemed specific enough, but when she found the trailing edge, after I turn off the water, the habit locked in immediately. The sensory signal of the faucet shutting off was sharp and clear. The prompt became unambiguous. Find the last thing you physically do at the end of your anchor. Use that. Fogg also discovered a variation he calls pearl habits. Some of the best anchors in people's lives started as irritants. He noticed a sound at night that kept waking him up, the click of his air conditioning unit cycling on and off. He hated it. It was disrupting his sleep. So he made it his anchor. After I hear the click, I will relax my face and neck. Within days, he looked forward to the click. The thing that had stolen sleep was now delivering it. His friend Amy did something similar. During a difficult co-parenting situation, she started noticing that after every hostile exchange with her ex-husband, she would replay the conversation in her mind for hours. She was giving him her entire afternoon, so she created a pearl habit. After I feel insulted, I will think of something kind to do for myself. She would drive to get her favorite tea. She would call a friend. She would queue up an audiobook she had been wanting to finish. His behavior became the cue for her self-care. Eventually, the thing she had dreaded, the hostile exchanges, became almost irrelevant. Her ex-husband, sensing her calm, softened. Years later, they co-hosted their daughter's graduation party together. This is the power of the anchor system. You do not have to design your life from scratch. You are not starting from zero. You already have dozens of reliable routines humming along underneath you. You just need to tap into them. Take any existing behavior you do every day without thinking and ask, what tiny new habit could I put right after this? The behavior ecosystem you already have is the infrastructure for every habit you want to build. We have covered the mechanics, the equation, the trap of motivation, the leverage of ability, the elegance of anchors. But there is one final piece of the tiny habit system that is so counterintuitive, so unself-help, so unexpected, that most people laugh when they hear it, and then they try it, and they cannot believe how fast things click into place. This piece is about your brain's reward circuitry. And it is about the one technique that wires new habits in faster than anything else in the scientific literature. It involves celebration. And before you roll your eyes, stay with me for 4 more minutes. Because this changes everything. Fogg was in the worst year of his life. A business he had started was failing. His young nephew had died. He was not sleeping. Most mornings, he avoided looking in the mirror because he did not want to see what he knew would be staring back. One morning, he picked up his floss, flossed one tooth, and looked at himself and said one word: victory. Something unexpected happened. A warmth opened up in his chest, a small but real shift in his internal state. He felt calmer, a little energized, like something had loosened. He is a behavior scientist. He did not dismiss it. He got curious. He tried it again the next morning. Same result. He experimented with other words. Awesome. He tried a fist pump, a smile into the mirror. He tried a quiet internal yay. All of it worked. The feelings were real. And here is the science behind why. When you celebrate effectively, when you create a genuine positive feeling at the right moment, you activate the reward circuitry in your brain. The brain tags the sequence of behaviors you just completed and encodes it more deeply. You are not just remembering the habit, you are reinforcing it neurologically. You are literally hacking your own brain chemistry to wire the new behavior in faster. This technique, this precise use of emotion as a habit-building tool, is something Fogg found had never been formally named or studied. He named what he was after: shine. Shine is the feeling of authentic positive emotion in the moment, right after you complete a new behavior. It is not a reward you schedule for later, a treat after 30 days of consistency. It is the immediate, in-the-moment feeling of success that fires the reward signal at exactly the right time. Because here is what your brain needs in order to form a habit: a clear behavioral sequence followed by a positive signal. That is the neurological loop. That is how behavior becomes automatic. For decades, habit researchers talked about rewards as things that came later: the candy after the workout, the TV time after the work, But Fogg's research shows that the reward needs to happen immediately, and the most powerful version of it is one you create yourself. A fist pump, a smile, a quiet internal, "I did it," a proud nod in the mirror. These are not affirmations, they are neurological signals. And here is the important distinction. The celebration needs to feel real, authentic. If it feels forced or silly, it will not produce shine. You need to find the celebration that actually generates that warm feeling in your chest. For some people, it is a fist pump. For others, it is a quiet exhale and a smile. For others, it is a whispered yes. Some people close their eyes for a moment and feel genuine satisfaction. Find the version that feels real for you. Linda, who you met at the beginning of this script, the woman with 6 kids under 13 who could not give herself credit for anything, began this practice. Every time she completed a small behavior, she gave herself a real, genuine moment of recognition. Not a grand party, just an honest acknowledgement that she had done the thing. And something unexpected began to accumulate. Not just more habits, but a different relationship with herself. The chronic self-criticism that had been running on repeat, the nighttime parade of everything she had not done, started to thin. Because she was building a counter-narrative, a real one, made of evidence, not affirmations. She actually had done things. She could feel it. She could feel it in the moment she did them. This is what Fogg means when he says, people change best by feeling good, not by feeling bad. This is one of the most counterintuitive findings in all of behavior science. Our culture worships discomfort as the price of growth. No pain, no gain. Discipline means suffering. You have to want it more than you want comfort. But the research is clear. People who celebrate small wins are more likely to continue. People who beat themselves up for missed days are more likely to quit. Shame is not a reliable motivator. It is a reliable quitter maker. The people who are most successful with tiny habits consistently report the same phenomenon. They started looking forward to doing their habits, not because of the outcome, not because of the weight they were going to lose or the book they were going to finish, but because of how it made them feel. Do it. The celebration became the motivation. Let me bring this together. Sarika, the project manager in Bangalore who could not maintain a routine, began building habits with this full system. She started tiny, 3 breaths, not 20 minutes of meditation. She anchored them to existing behaviors, and she celebrated each one genuinely. Within months, she had a morning routine that had eluded her for years. Not because her bipolar disorder went away, it did not, but because even on her hardest days, the habits were small enough to do and rooted deeply enough to survive. And here is what she told Fogg. The change was not just in the habits, it was in her confidence. She had evidence, now real, compounding evidence, that she could design for change. That when things fell apart, she could pick up the smallest thread and rebuild from there. That tiny was not a consolation prize. Tiny was the architecture. We have covered all 5 pillars, but before I close, I want to leave you with one final idea. Because there is a question underneath this entire video that I have not directly answered yet. You might be thinking, okay, I understand this, but the habits I have tried to build, they feel too big to be tiny. How do I get from one push-up to where I actually want to be? Amy wrote 1 post-it a morning and quadrupled her income. Sarika turned on a stovetop burner and built the most stable routine of her life. Linda said 7 words every morning. It's going to be a great day. At the edge of her bed during the worst season of her life. And those 7 words became the thread she pulled to climb back out. These are not metaphors. These are the actual mechanisms. Here is the principle at the core of all of them. Tiny can start now. That is not a motivational slogan. It is a design principle. Because every giant change you want to make has, somewhere inside it, a behavior small enough to do in the next 60 seconds. And if you can do that behavior today, and again tomorrow, and again the day after, if you can keep the seed alive, the roots deepen, the plant grows, the habit becomes automatic. And as it becomes automatic, your ability increases, your confidence increases, Your motivation to do more increases naturally. The habit becomes its own fuel. But here is the piece that makes this more than just a productivity technique. Fogg noticed something in his data that he did not expect. People who successfully built tiny habits were not just building habits. They were building a new relationship with themselves. Every time you design a habit correctly and it works, every time you show up, even in a tiny way, and feel the shine of having done it, you are accumulating evidence that you are a person who follows through. Not because you forced yourself, because you designed for success and then succeeded. That identity shift, from I keep failing to change, to I am someone who knows how to design change, is perhaps the most powerful outcome of this entire method. You are not trying to be perfect. You are not trying to be disciplined. You are experimenting. You are a scientist in a personal change lab. When something does not work, you do not interpret that as a character flaw. You interpret it as a design insight. What is making this behavior hard to do? That one question changes the entire frame. It takes the conversation out of the territory of shame and into the territory of engineering. Here is the practical summary of everything you have learned today. The Fogg Behavior Model tells us that every behavior requires motivation, ability, and a prompt, arriving simultaneously. If a habit is failing, check the prompt first. Then the ability, motivation, is the last variable to adjust. The motivation trap is the belief that wanting it more is the answer. It is not. Motivation fluctuates. Design does not. The variable you control most completely is ability, how easy the behavior is to do. The ability dial is your most powerful lever. Make the behavior smaller than you think you should. Find the weakest link in your ability chain and address it directly. A habit that can survive your worst day will outlast every grand plan built for your best one. The anchor system lets you piggyback new habits onto existing behaviors. The recipe. After I anchor, I will tiny behavior. Match location, frequency, and theme. Find the trailing edge for precision. Turn irritants into pearl habits. And the celebration mechanism is the neurological hack that wires everything in. The feeling of shine, authentic positive emotion immediately after a behavior, is the signal your brain needs to encode the habit. Celebrate genuinely. Find what makes you actually feel good. Do it every single time. People change best by feeling good, not by whipping themselves harder, not by wanting it more, not by summoning willpower from depths they do not have, by designing well, starting small, and celebrating genuinely. That is not the advice our culture gives us. Our culture wants the dramatic story, the athlete who trained through the pain, the CEO who got up at 4 a.m., but those stories are exceptions that survive by selection bias. The boring, invisible truth, the one that shows up in the data week after week, is that the people who change the most start the smallest. You are not broken. You never were. Your approach was, and now you have a different one. Now that you know the mechanics of how habits actually form, the equation, the trap, the lever, the anchor, the celebration, there is one more piece of the puzzle that almost nobody addresses. You now know how behavior works. You know that motivation is unreliable. You know that tiny is powerful. You know how to anchor and celebrate. But here is what this video cannot give you on its own. It cannot rewire the system running underneath all of it. Because your habits do not just fail because of bad design. They fail because of how your mind interprets difficulty in the moment you need to act. The thought that appears right before you stop. The meaning your brain assigns to struggle. The subtle signal that says step back and feels exactly like logic. That is not a habit problem. That is a systems problem. And it goes deeper than any recipe card or anchor sequence can reach. I made a video about exactly that. About the gap between knowing what to do and actually doing it. About why the real enemy is not laziness or lack of discipline, but the interpretation your mind learned to run automatically, and what it actually takes to change it. That is the video you watch next. It is right here.